Hello, my name is Prayer Carter, and today I will be doing my Evaluating Advocacy video presentation. Today I will be doing my presentation on the population of foster youth. So when it comes to foster youth, a foster youth is a child or adolescent placed under the care and supervision of the child welfare system because of abuse, neglect, abandonment, or other circumstances that compromise their safety and well-being. When it comes to their culture, they are a diverse population, including children and adolescents from various racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Many foster youth face a high risk of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. The California Department of Social Services reports that up to 80% of children in foster care have a significant mental health challenges compared to approximately 18 to 20%, 22% of the general population. Okay. And when we look at some of the challenges that foster youth face, they commonly face challenges including placement instability, disrupted education, limited access to mental health resources. They face stigma and higher risk of homelessness and justice involvement after aging out of care. Okay, trauma and repeated loss often influence emotional regulation, trust building, and long-term relationships. Additionally, many foster youth navigate culture disconnection when placed outside of their communities, impacting identity formation and belonging. Okay, and when we look at the resiliency of foster youth, so despite these challenges, foster youth demonstrate remarkable resiliencies. So studies highlight that protective role of stable relationships with supportive adults, culturally affirming environments, access to extended care services, and opportunities for youth to voice and advocate within the system. Okay, so personal strengths such as autonomy, adaptability, and leadership often emerge from navigating difficult transitions, allowing youth to advocate for themselves and others. Okay, as we take a look at the historical context and current societal approach, okay, when we talk about the marginalization of foster youth, it began in the early 20th century when child welfare agency removed children from families facing poverty, discrimination, or immigration challenges instead of addressing the root conditions, okay? So racial bias and assimilation practices cause cultural displacement, particularly for Black, indigenous, and immigrant children. Although the system later shifted from orphanages to foster homes, many youth still experience placement instability, a limited autonomy, and inadequate support when aging out of care. And then we look at today, societal approaches emphasize trauma-informed care. They emphasize permanency planning and extended services. However, foster youth still face homelessness, justice involvement, and educational barriers. Current policy efforts focus on improving transitions to adulthood, strengthening family preservation, and centering youth voice. But systemic inequalities continue to shape their outcomes. Okay. And so when we look at some of the policies that at the local, state, and federal levels that affect foster youth, looking first at the local level. So here in Bakersfield, California, they have the ILP program, which foster youth and former foster youth receive transitional and supportive services such as life skills training, education planning, career and job support. They receive transportation assistance and resource referrals. Typically, the IL Heat program, their goal is to help youth transition more successfully out of foster care towards independence. At a state level, we have the California's AB 12 program, which is the extended care, foster care, which allows eligible youth to remain in care until age 21. Okay, before this was, they would age out at age 18. Okay, so this bill is providing continued support with housing, education, and employment while promoting a gradual transition to independence. When it comes to a federal level, there are a couple different federal policies. So one is the Fostering Connection to Success and Increasing Adoption Act of 2008 and the John H. Schaefer Foster Care Program for successfully transition to adult fund states funds to provide education vouchers, independent living services, extended care, and health coverage that support long-term well-being for foster youth. Okay, so this is just a couple. There are more that help foster youth. So, given that we already talked about foster youth do receive a good amount of services, so for my advocacy plan is to increase, right? So, increase access to stable housing, mental health supports, and culturally responsive services for youth transitioning out of foster care. This includes collaborating with community agencies to create streamlined referral systems, advocating for extended aftercare services until maybe about 25, and ensuring youth are informed about available educational and financial resources. I also plan to elevate youth voices by incorporating their lived experiences into policy discussions, program design, and advisory boards. Okay. Additionally, I will promote trauma-informed and culturally affirming practices among service providers to reduce disparities and support successful long-term outcomes for foster youth. And again, I have a couple here listed. So again, as I stated, the plan is to increase what foster youth already receive. So housing, mental health access, education is a big one. And then also just to get their voice shared, okay, out in the community. And then when looking at a social media campaign to advocate, I did include it here on the right side. And so my plan, so for my social media campaign, it will focus on raising awareness about the unmet needs of foster youth transitioning into adulthood. By doing this, we share statistics, success stories, and available resources using platforms so such as Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Foster youth use those platforms frequently. The campaign will highlight barriers such as homelessness, lack of emotional support, and limited access to education while promoting community involvement, mentorship, and advocacy opportunities. Okay, by partnering with youth serving organizations and using hashtags, reels, and digital storytelling, the campaign aims to amplify youth voices. We also want to reduce stigma and increase engagement and support for foster youth initiatives. Okay. A part of this campaign will also be a survey link, which I have included here on the right. Some of these questions focus on when we ask the youth, they will be distributed to the youth. What are your biggest challenges as you transition out of foster care? Which resources or services have you been most helpful to you? What support do you feel is missing that would better meet your needs? How confident do you feel navigating housing, employment, and education? And what is one challenge you believe would improve services for youth? Okay, so that is just a grasp of some of the question that is on the survey. And to administer the survey, it will be distributed online through youth service agencies, so like foster care, also group homes, and independent living programs. Also, social media platforms to reach current and former foster youths ages 16 through 25 to hear those voices, okay? Participation will be voluntarily and anonymously with informed consent obtained and trauma-informed language used throughout. Okay, results will be collected securely and analyzed to identify service gaps and guide advocacy, program design, and outreach efforts. Okay, and when distributing this survey, we found that some of the what they need is community needs, right? They also need, again, stable housing, financial literacy, employment readiness, access to services, so such as mental health, and then also mentorship. Okay. And when it comes to evaluation, how I will evaluate the program and that I plan to implement is to, for one, I would evaluate the advocacy plan using both process and outcome measures as recommended by Hofer. Process evaluation would track engagement metrics, so the number of survey responses, social media reach, partnerships formed, and resource requests to determine whether activities were implemented as intended. Also, outcome evaluation would assess changes in awareness of services, increase referrals, and youth-reported confidence in navigating housing, education, or employment. Pre and post surveys are important. The data, the stakeholders, and feedbacks in tracking participation over time will provide evidence effectiveness and areas for refinement, areas that we can readjust. Okay, and then when distributing this advocacy plan or the survey, some of the lessons learned include the importance of youth-centered communication and using social media platforms where youth are already engaging. So as we said, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, right? So building trust and explaining the purpose of data collection, improved participation. So when youth know what they're filling out is going to be, used for them and how is it going to be used and how is it going to help them, it increases their engagement. So barriers included limited outreach capacity, difficulty reaching youth without stable housing or technology access, and inconsistent survey completion. All right, so coordinating with agencies approved reach, but required additional time and relationship building. Okay, so these challenges highlight the need for long-term partnership and flexibility, trauma-informed engagement strategies. Again, I did list them here of how the evaluation will be used. So we will track engagement. We would do pre and post surveys to measure awareness, monitor referrals to support services, and then collect feedback from youth and partners, and then review analytics to refine strategies. Okay, and this, excuse me, and this is my references. Thank you.